taking us to Lisa Owen and Checkpoint. I'm back tomorrow, 3:45. Till then.
Kei te whakarango mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei, the government's top speed tax turnaround, GST on KiwiSaver fees, is off faster than you can say whiplash. Plans to set up a safe centre to take illegal drugs in Auckland's CBD. Is it time to put 13-year-olds to work to plug massive staff shortages? Some Aussie retailers reckon so. Two far-right activists are dragged into the dock after refusing to recognise the court. Claims Gloria Vale girls as young as 8 feared being groped while doing their jobs. We're in the toilet paper town that could be wiped out by a nasty industrial dispute.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Talofa lava, I'm Marama Tibole. The Revenue Minister is blaming misinformation for the furious backlash to a proposal to tax fees on KiwiSaver funds. The government has abandoned its plan to change the way tax is applied to service fees charged by currently exempt managed funds. David Parker says the plan has now been abandoned after the media and some fund managers pushed incorrect information.
The clarion call against it risks undermining public confidence in KiwiSaver, including misrepresentations that this was a tax on KiwiSaver contributions or their returns, which it never was.
Official modelling suggested the move could slash balances by more than $100 billion by 2070. The Mayor of Kawerau is worried that the dispute between a toilet paper manufacturer and its workers could turn ugly. Mayor Malcolm Campbell says his community is feeling the impact of a heated 3-week standoff between Essity and its employees. He says it's important a solution is found.
It's going to have a devastating effect on the Eastern Bay of Plenty overall. It's not a good thing to have in your community, I can tell you that now, and from the long-term point of view, it's the damage it does to Kawerau's name.
Malcolm Campbell says the Swedish company is one of the town's biggest ratepayers, and he recently worked to convince it to remain in New Zealand. A midwife support group says it's a miracle there's any community midwives left. The College of Midwives has filed a class action in the High Court against the Health Ministry, alleging a breach of contract. Hutt Maternity Action Trust Chair Meg Waghorn says lead maternity care in the Hutt Valley is in a serious crisis.
To be honest, it's kind of miraculous that we have any LMC midwives left working in the community, because they have been putting up with just such incredibly poor conditions.
Meg Waghorn says many midwives have left because of the minimal pay and poor conditions. One of two far-right activists who appeared in court today has told her supporters they're fighting for freedom of speech. Calvin Alp and Hannah Spearer made a first appearance in the Christchurch District Court today on charges of distributing objectionable material and failing to comply with police orders. They're jointly charged with sharing a publication showing the full live stream of the Christchurch mosque attacks. About 60 supporters met the pair after their release on bail, and Hannah Spearer said they were fighting for them. She said they're taking a stand because other people are being silenced. A former Gloria Vale member has told the court she felt leaders used food as a weapon. Pearl Valla is one of 6 women arguing that for the domestic work they did for years at Gloria Vale, they should have been recognised as employees, not volunteers. Gloria Vale's leaders deny the claims that the women were employees. Mrs Valla says a former leader used to coerce members to fast as a means to cut costs.
And the first thing to go when they're saving money is always the food. It's used like a weapon. It was when Hopeful was still alive. He was standing up at the tables and saying, people that just leave, they just ring up and just expect us to give them this and that. And we're going to be Christian and we're going to go without food for 3 days.
Pearl Valla told the court as a young child she was so hungry she would eat leftover curd cheese, which made her sick. World leaders are paying tribute to the former Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev. President Vladimir Putin, who clashed with Mr Gorbachev over the ending of the Cold War, expressed his deepest condolences. Mr Putin once described the Soviet Union's demise as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the last century. US President Joe Biden described Mr Gorbachev as a leader who saw a different future was possible and was prepared to risk his career to achieve it. It's 4 minutes past 5. New Zealand Cricket is confident there isn't about to be a mass exodus of black caps from their national contracts. Veteran all-rounder Colin de Grandhomme has been granted a release from his central contract just 3 weeks after star pace bowler Trent Boult received the same. De Grandhomme was a surprise selection in the Australian Big Bash League player draft on Monday, despite being ineligible. NZC High Performance General Manager Brian Stronach says they're not worried about other black caps following suit.
We're pretty confident around our environment and how we're pretty adaptive around how we work with those players, and a lot of the time they get to go and do things like the IPL and other leagues and still play for their country and so forth, but we do understand that it's different for different individuals.
The defending champion and a two-time champion have both been knocked out in the opening round of the women's singles at the US Tennis Open. 2021 winner Emma Raducanu has suffered a straight sets defeat to French woman Alizé Cornet. And in the following match, 2018 and 2020 champion Naomi Osaka went down in straight sets to 19th seeded American Danielle Collins. Men's second seed Rafael Nadal also got an early scare, but fought back to beat Australian wildcard Rinky Hijikata in 4 sets.
Very happy now. Have been a long wait for some time. I thought that maybe I will not be able to be back, but here I am now. Super happy. The night sessions here in New York are the best, without a doubt.
And that's the news.
Midwives demand fairer treatment.
I don't think it's reasonable for the ministry to expect us to run on goodwill and love of the job.
The government comes under fire for its treatment of KiwiSaver fees.
If you've got any extra cash and you're trying to put it into your KiwiSaver account, this has a huge impact on the long-term value of those retirement savings.
And a new treatment at the dentist.
And it's a significant barrier for some people to put in accessing dental care, fear of the needle and needle phobia.
Always good for you. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
RNZ National, Lisa Owen and Checkpoint is next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, cloudy periods. Now, the odd shower mainly about Coromandel Peninsula and north of Orewa. Waikato to Manawatu, including Taumaranui and Taihape. Mainly fine, but cloud and a few showers north of Mount Taranaki tomorrow. For Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Fine, apart from the odd shower about Gisborne today. Horowhenua, Kapiti and Wellington. Also Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, cloudy periods, a few showers at times. For Westland and Fiordland, rain developing with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms, easing to showers in Fiordland overnight. For Canterbury, fine today, cloudy tomorrow with a few spots of rain. Otago and Southland, cloud increasing. Scattered rain developing this evening, then easing to isolated showers tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. And just before I end, I've got a little bit of traffic here for you, Lisa. State Highway 1 is still closed northbound between Pōkeno and Bombay. Continue to exit at Razorback Road to rejoin State Highway 1 at Ramarama via Bombay Road and Great South Road. It's 5:07.
Nā mihi marama, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. In a remarkable backdown, the government has dumped its plan to put GST on KiwiSaver fees, not even 24 hours since the proposal was released. Ministers were caught off guard by the fierce backlash to the proposal. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Few policies have had so short a life. Introduced yesterday afternoon, gone by lunchtime.
This is Labour's day of shame.
We're going to repeal that bill that we just introduced yesterday because we got it wrong. Oops!
Long may the U-turns keep coming because there's a lot more taxes to unwind from here.
The opposition revelling in the government backdown, a U-turn in record time. Just this morning on Morning Report, the Revenue Minister was staunchly defending his plan to charge GST on KiwiSaver fees.
We are proposing to close a loophole.
But by early afternoon, David Parker had had a change of heart.
We reflected on the news media this morning and the furore that we'd created. We thought it's not that important to us.
And it was quite the furore. Tax experts and KiwiSaver providers warned of a raid on savings due to an increase in fees. Official modelling suggested a $20,000 hit to a person's KiwiSaver balance by retirement. And National called it a tax grab and a broken promise, the party collecting some 20,000 signatures in opposition.
We caught them out, we stopped this one, but you can be sure they will be dreaming up new ways to fleece New Zealanders, and National will be on the lookout for more of this to come.
You cannot trust Labor on tax, and this is evidence of that.
What I would be embarrassed about is leading a party who once called KiwiSaver a glorified Christmas club.
The government in full-on damage control. Ministers say they were simply seeking to balance the playing field for fund managers and ensure consistency in how GST is applied. David Parker blames the backlash on misinformation, which he says was pushed by the media and some fund managers.
The clarion call against it risks undermining public confidence in KiwiSaver, including misrepresentations that this was a tax on KiwiSaver contributions or their returns, which it never was. But we weren't willing to put KiwiSaver reputation at risk.
But it's not just KiwiSaver's reputation at risk. It's the government's too.
Was your political antennae just completely wrong on this?
The back down may be embarrassing now, but an election loss next year would hurt a whole lot more.
Well, to break down all the whys and wherefores, we're joined now by our political editor, Jane Patterson. Kia ora, Jane. So what happened here?
Kia ora, Lisa. Gone by lunchtime was that policy. Yesterday it was about the principle of consistency across the GST elements of the tax law. Today it was all about politics. Obviously, senior leaders saw the backlash. They were taken by surprise, partly because this tax proposal hadn't been introduced, or didn't have lights put around it when it was introduced in this bill yesterday. So they came in, apparently David Parker and Finance Minister Grant Robertson got together after the round of pretty dire media and decided to just pull it in time for them to come down onto the tiles on the way through into Parliament and into the House, where, as you just heard in Craig's package, that did not stop the opposition from laying into them about the original proposal and the response.
So, Jane, as you mentioned there, hardly flashing lights around the proposal when it landed yesterday. What did the Minister have to say about how the legislation was introduced?
So David Parker said that there had been consultation with the financial services industry and there had been support from some of the smaller players to get rid of the competitive disadvantage they claim to have had. So there'd been consultation with them, but not publicly. He said that he thought there was going to be other interest around elements like removing a fringe benefit tax and other things that they did put out a media release about, but there was no mention of this specific change. And he said they just hadn't expected this backlash. He aimed directly at the media. He said that some media reports suggesting or leading people to believe that it was going to be a tax on KiwiSaver contributions has contributed to the public backlash. And also he said that fund managers that had been in support of it, apparently to Minister's surprise, were now coming out publicly against it. They've just said we were doing it for the industry. They seem to think it's fine. We're not going to fight that fight. But obviously an incredibly quick retreat from the government today. So bureaucracy can move quickly, it appears, when it has to.
Is there a pattern here, I wonder, of the government ignoring advice? Because there was a consultation process and it happened some time ago, actually. And, Deloitte, their advice was don't do it. And then we see the cost of living payment too, where Treasury and IRD raised concerns about going ahead, yet the government did.
That's right. And, as we've seen in that cost of living story, the government is really still struggling with that. It's had to make changes and tweaks to that. Again, when you look back on the advice that IRD itself furnished to the ministers, they just said it's too big a job. This is going to be too difficult. The government went on a big controversy. They've had a lot of damaging coverage over it and they're now dealing with this. For this particular one, I don't think it was a matter of ignoring advice. It was just that I don't think the political risks were either picked up or flagged, and it certainly came as a surprise to his ministerial colleagues about suddenly this big KiwiSaver tax situation. It was more, I think, that it was being looked at in terms of that tax law being consistent, and so when it all blew up, when the advice itself said, and this is what the advice said in terms of the potential impact on KiwiSaver funds, that it could result in reduced returns for savers and consequently reduce the future balances in KiwiSaver. So all of the advice and the flags, I suppose the red flags, were in the regulatory impact statement that the department provides, but no one picked it up, no one identified it as a political risk, and I think that is what has landed the government where it is today.
Thanks for that, Jane. That's our political editor, Jane Patterson, joining us live there from Parliament with that whiplash-inducing turnaround on the GST policy. Let us know your thoughts on that one, 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Now, it is almost 15 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. In breaking news, the Internal Affairs Minister says firefighters have called off their industrial action and have agreed to enter mediation with Fire and Emergency. Jan Tinetti says she met with both sides on Tuesday over their ongoing standoff over pay and equipment issues. She says all strike notices will be suspended and no further industrial action will continue or occur. FENZ will also withdraw the request for facilitated bargaining through the Employment Relations Authority. Kawerau's mayor says if an industrial dispute involving 145 mill workers isn't resolved fast, the town will be absolutely devastated. The union members have been locked out of the paper mill for 3 weeks after they rejected a 3% pay rise. And now their employer, Swedish-owned Essity, is threatening 67 staff with more than $500,000 in damages. Our reporter Finn Blackwell reports from Kawerau as some desperate workers head to the food bank.
Mayor Malcolm Campbell breaking media silence today, 22 days into the town's pulp and paper dispute.
It could turn quite ugly, and that's what's concerning me.
145 mill workers have been locked out and unpaid since August 9th after they rejected a 3% pay rise. And while Mr Campbell is at pains to stress he's not taking sides in the dispute, he can't emphasise enough the importance of the mill to the community.
I don't want this to carry on any more than anybody else does, and I just hope it gets a quick resolve. Some of the things I am concerned about, if people's mortgages are affected and they're having problems with the bank. It could be long term. It really could.
Essity manufactures well-known brands such as Purex and Sorbent toilet paper, handy paper towels and a range of feminine hygiene products. When the country was locked down and people hoarding toilet paper for fear it would run out, Essity staff kept working so people wouldn't have to do without. Pulp and Paper Workers Union Secretary Tane Phillips says this isn't the thanks he thought they'd get. He says Essity isn't acting in good faith.
The company's very quiet, but tomorrow we have got facilitation, which we really hope we're going there with open minds to try and get a deal done. We hope that the company are coming with the same mindset, that after a couple of days we walk away with a deal that's acceptable to both parties.
At a roundtable discussion organised for RNZ by the union, other locked-out workers felt the same.
We're speaking to quite a few of the members constantly. We meet with them once a week and help them out with food vouchers. They are struggling. It is a hard time.
It is hard. You know, we've been out of work for about 5 weeks now.
When there is a lockout that has been like this one has been, and as vindictive as this one has been, it will take a long, long time to heal those wounds. They will be festering for a long time.
As the mill workers' bank balances rapidly diminish, their friends and neighbours are rallying to help them. At the Kawerau House of Hope Church on Tamarangi Drive, Pastor Sharon Hecky is busy packing food parcels for those in need.
People of Kawerau just all come together when something like this happens. And being a really community-based, place where we do work together to try and keep the momentum going.
On the town's high street, it was hard to find anyone not in support of the workers.
Workers need the money to feed the family. The family pay bills. They got bills like everybody else. Just good on them for fighting for what they want. Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, we can.
It's absolutely ridiculous. They're going to try and sue normal people in our community simply because they don't want to give them what they're due, what they deserve. But that's multi-billion-dollar companies overseas. That's just what they do.
They're doing all the work, making the money for the company, and they're the ones that are suffering.
In a statement, Essity said average earnings of union employees at Kawerau is $120,000 per year, including overtime. It said it's offering 14.7% over 3 years, and the union's request for an upfront 7% increase ignores soaring production costs. Mayor Malcolm Campbell says it doesn't bear thinking what will happen to the town if an agreement isn't reached.
But that's what we're here for. We've been putting here for the last 70 years, making toilet paper and newsprint and login and all the rest of it. So, yeah, and we're proud of that. We really are proud of it. We're proud of our workforce here, we're proud of our companies here, and something has gone wrong.
The parties will begin 2 days of negotiations tomorrow.
It is 19 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And coming up, should 13-year-olds be allowed to work, proper hours and jobs in retail? An issue our friends across the Tasman are grappling with. We'll have more on that shortly. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program. Let us know what you think about 13-year-olds and up working in those kinds of jobs. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines now. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Thank you, Lisa. Firefighters have called off their industrial action and will go back to mediation with fire and emergency. FENZ will also withdraw the request for facilitated bargaining through the Employment Relations Authority. The Revenue Minister is blaming misinformation for the strong opposition to a plan to apply GST to KiwiSaver fees. Official modelling suggested the move could slash balances by more than $100 billion by 2070. And David Parker has now done a U-turn on the idea. He says the media and some fund managers claimed it was a tax on KiwiSaver contributions or their returns, which it never was. 2 far-right activists have been remanded on bail after appearing in the Christchurch District Court today. Calvin Alp and Hannah Spira are charged with sharing a publication showing the full live stream of the Christchurch mosque attacks and failing to comply with police orders. Spira told supporters that the pair are fighting for freedom of speech. And the Mayor of Kawerau hopes a resolution can be found soon between the local paper mill owners and their workers. Malcolm Campbell says his community is feeling the impact of a heated 3-week standoff between Sweden-based Essity and its employers. He's worried the dispute could turn ugly. We'll have some more news headlines in about 20 minutes. I've got some weather for you. Mostly fine around the country, although rain developing in Westland and Fiordland, heavy falls and possible thunderstorms, easing to showers in Fiordland overnight. And my eye in the sky helicopters is all go here right now.
Have we got one?
We do have one. We do have one. Here it is. So for Auckland, there was that truck fire earlier around near Bombay. So the left lane is now open past the scene. However, the right lane will remain closed overnight, and a full closure will be required tonight from Bombay to Ramarama between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. for emergency repair works. Now I'm just going to buzz down. It's very fast. You won't believe how fast I can travel, really. Down to Wellington. So State Highway 59 by Kakariki to Pukerua Bay remains an active work site. It'll continue to remain closed for safety reasons. And I'm just buzzing over to Hawke's Bay now. Due to surface flooding and potholes, road users are advised to take extra care. If you've seen anything else on the road, let me know. It's 5:22.
Fantastic piloting skills. Ngā mihi. Another Black Caps player has quit the side. Colin de Grandhomme has opted to jump the ditch to play in Australia's Big Bash League. The all-rounder was a surprise inclusion in the Adelaide side this week, despite still being on contract for the Black Caps. But today he's announced he's finished playing international cricket for New Zealand. And our sports reporter Clay Wilson joins us now. What's going on? Why is he heading off?
It's been rather interesting the way this has all unfolded. On Monday they had this American-style draft for the Australian Big Bash League, and Colin de Grandhomme's name got plucked out by the Adelaide Strikers, and he was off to go and play for Adelaide. But there was one problem with that, being that he was contracted to New Zealand Cricket, one of 20 central contracts, the top contracts, the Black Caps contracts. And New Zealand Cricket hadn't given him a special release. Players do sometimes get special releases to play in these T20 leagues, but he hadn't had one. So he essentially must be available to play for the Black Caps and play for New Zealand. The Black Caps have games coming up. So what that did is it some conversations then ensued between Colin de Grandhomme and New Zealand Cricket, and this afternoon we've just found out that he's decided to retire from international cricket, and he's been released from his contract, which means he can now go and play in that league and go and play in any other league for that matter around the world at this point. He is 36 years old, and he's had struggles with injury in recent years. He hasn't, while he's been on and off in the team, he has had his solid runs, but he hasn't been one of the top half dozen players, let's say. So perhaps he's decided it's time, while he's at the end of his career, to have more time with his family, but also go and make some money where there is a lot more money to be made. New Zealand Cricket fully acknowledge that. And of course it comes just 3 weeks after Trent Boult. He didn't retire from international cricket, but he has been released from his contract to go and for essentially the same reasons. And he played in the West Indies. He's been selected to play against Australia coming up. So slightly different situations, but the same in that it revolves around, yes, the ability to make that money and have the freedom to play when you want to play.
Do you reckon that New Zealand Cricket was blindsided by this?
Well, I spoke to David White after the Trent Boult announcement, and of course one of the obvious questions was, do you expect more players to do the same? And the answer at that point was, well, we don't know for sure, but we don't know of anyone else that wants to do it. And essentially I got the feeling that they weren't expecting anyone else. So the fact that he was in the draft and then they didn't know and they said, well, we haven't released him, does show that they didn't really have any idea that he was going to be putting his name forward and that this might transpire. So
are the floodgates open for others then?
Well, that's what it becomes, doesn't it? Are more Black Caps going to follow suit? So Brian Stronach, he spoke to media this afternoon. He's the GM of high performance for New Zealand Cricket, and he basically reiterated what David White was saying, and that's along the lines of the fact they have a pretty good relationship between the Players Association, the players, and New Zealand Cricket, and they do, especially when you compare it to the way the rugby situation is at the moment. And that most of the time they can figure it out. And the players, the Black Caps players, have been granted more freedom in recent years to go and play in these leagues. So if more and more players do that, then I guess New Zealand Cricket doesn't have to release them from their contracts. It does become a bit messy at that point. But I think they will find a way to figure that out. It's just these individual cases, it's the way it's worked out with Trent Boult and Colin de Grandhomme. But I don't know if the floodgates are open and we're going to see a whole lot of Black Caps go and decide to do that. They are going to get the freedom to be able to still play for New Zealand and still make a bit of money where they can.
Thanks, Clay. Clay Wilson there. Let's do a quick bit of feedback from you about the KiwiSaver situation. This is a big U-turn by the government. Why is there no GST on bank charges, this listener says? Could be a big source of revenue. Maybe cannot risk upsetting the Aussie banks. And another one, short and to the point, a ridiculous about turn. Do keep feedback coming, 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at checkpointrnz. Australian teenagers as young as 13 should be used to fill massive labour shortages, according to a retail industry body. At the moment, different states have different rules about what age is okay to be in paid work. But the Australian Retailers Association reckons a nationwide agreement could unlock access to young, keen workers and plug massive staffing gaps. Fleur Brown is the Australian Retailers Association Chief Industry Affairs Officer, and she joins us now. Hi Fleur, what makes you think teens are the answer to this problem?
Hi Lisa. Well look, actually teens are part of the answer and we're really looking at a diverse range of solutions. But certainly there is, up to 200,000 of those within this 13 to 15 age group who are, perfect for frontline retail jobs and hospitality jobs, and many people have their first experience in a job in retail, in fact.
Do you know on average what the age would be of younger people working in retail? Because 13 seems quite young.
Look, it does vary. So if you're in Queensland, not the average, but the starting age is 13. If you're in New South Wales or South Australia, there is no minimum starting age. And if you're in Victoria, the starting age is 15. Now, we're talking about quite a limited number of hours there. So, of course, these hours should not interfere with school times, and there's some caveats around that. Also, the average worker in that category would be looking at about 10 hours a week.
And what about things like pay? Is the expectation that they get less? Do they get a minimum wage? What are the rules?
They are on, the wages are set by our Fair Work Commission, and they're on a minimum wage for that cohort. Once they reach 16, they're in a different category, but they're also in a different work category as well, able to work full-time at that point. So what we're calling for really is, in Australia, national consistency, so that there's a lot more, a clearer set of guidelines that are consistent around the country, and hopefully that means that we can then mobilise a little bit more of that the activity within that age group that's currently working around the country.
When you say, obviously, they get paid under a different pay rate to the adult minimum wage, is there not a risk that they will take jobs off adults or be used as cheap labour?
I think what we're putting on the table is a whole range of solutions. So at the other end of the spectrum, we're looking to mobilise mature age workers and double the earning threshold for pensioners. We're looking at getting more women participation because of child affordability being a huge barrier. So really, retailers are in a acute crisis. They're looking at mobilising workers within every cohort. So it's really not just a focus on this age group. It's looking at a diverse range of solutions for what is a true crisis at this point for the workforce, and will have an impact on the national economy if it's not addressed.
Do teenagers these days want a job?
Absolutely. I think many of us look around and think about our own first jobs, and there's certainly, I think, around a third of young people within this age group are currently working in some capacity, probably around that 10 hours a week mark. So yes, absolutely.
Appreciate your time, Fleur. That's Fleur Brown, who's with the Australian Retailers Association. Love to hear what you think about that. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Trying to mobilise 13 years old and plus because they've got massive staff shortages in retail in Australia. It is 5:30. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National, and it's time for the business news now. Ko taku hoa I Naianei, ko Nona Peltier. Nona joins us in the studio to talk all things business. Let's start off with employers being told to meet the market, act quickly to recruit the best and brightest staff. That's interesting, off the back of what we've just been talking about.
Yes.
What should the priorities be?
Well, the priority is know exactly what you want and then offer up to people something that matches their expectations. Instead of saying, I'm wanting to hire someone, if you can do this for me or that for me, you really need to tap into what you can do for them, which has changed in a market where unemployment is quite low. So, for example, say you're trying to recruit a young person, you have to be understanding what's motivating them. And career development for younger people is number one priority. Of course, salary and work-life balance are in there as well. But older workers, for example, would put more emphasis on work-life balance than they would career development, which would probably not even feature very highly at all. But money is important all along. So if you have, if you're not going to be able to offer a nice package, you might have to then offer the right sort of things that people would want to be attracted to, like, for example, opportunities to work from home. 39% of would-be employees, that's a deal breaker if they don't have that. They need that work from home option. For others, it's really the career development. If you're a young person, you want to know, where can I go with this career? Otherwise, I might as well just work somewhere else. So money isn't the only thing, but for Aucklanders, it's very important. Not surprising.
Expensive city, Nona.
Yeah.
Let's talk about DGL. Its culture is in the news again. Now, I'm just reminding people, this is following derogatory and sexist comments made by the chief executive earlier this year. And this was in relation to Nadia Lim, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
My Food Bag. So he was basically comparing their performance, the company, which is a chemical company that listed around the same time as My Food Bag, and saying, that she had used her femininity to advance the company's ambitions, which really left a sour note. I mean, was deemed racist, well, totally inappropriate, sexist, you name it. Anyway,
every ist you can imagine.
It just was not going down very well whatsoever. So the company reacted quite swiftly by delisting from the NZX and packing their bags and heading back to Australia. And when they got there, the board decided they would do a review of their culture, and they did. And they found, the independent review found that no, they had a diverse and inclusive culture. Yes, and not only that, they found that it was a positive work culture where trust and respect was consistent across the business. But they did recommend that there should be they should improve gender diversity in the senior level. So,
and what that respect didn't extend to the comments of one of their senior executives.
It was basically found that they should have more diversity in leadership and management, but overall, the company had a pretty strong culture. So there you go.
And Nona, should we take a spin around the markets, please?
Let's do that. So the top 50 index, it fell 48 points today. That's a drop of 0.4% to 11,601. The New Zealand dollar, again, it's trading very little change from where we've been, 61.4 US cents. And again, that's the big dollar story, anticipation of interest rate hikes in the United States. 89.2 Australian, so if you're travelling over there, budget for that, and 52.6 British pence.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. Nona Peltier there with business news. Auckland CBD could soon be a safe haven for homeless at risk of overdosing, but some are unconvinced an overdose prevention centre will make a difference. The Drug Foundation unveiled the plan at the City Mission today, with the proposal now with government ministers for approval and licensing. The foundation says harmful drugs like fentanyl could reach our shores and take hold of those living on Auckland's streets. But some who work on the coalface doubt the city's homeless will flock to the centre. Here's Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe.
In a tiny office tucked in a quietish corner of the Auckland District Court sits Fire Michelle Kidd. Don't let the setting deceive you. When she's not here, in court or elsewhere, the kaihono ki Te Rangamarie for Te Rangamarie Charitable Trust is checking on those who call the city streets home.
We're talking about such difficulties, but they have not addressed the fundamental issues.
Fire Michelle is speaking out because she's not convinced, far from it actually, that an overdose prevention centre is what Tamaki Makaurau needs.
In my opinion, this is another Band-Aid. Okay, it's another Band-Aid. Don't get me reary, don't get me angry here.
The NZ Drug Foundation is proposing a 3-year pilot program it says will take drug use off the streets into safe, medically supervised settings.
We had one woman we consulted with actually who said to us, the things that happen to me down the alleyway when I'm taking the drug wouldn't happen anymore. Would you really do this for us? So that's what we're talking about, a safe space for people to be in. As you know, the Drug Foundation has been pushing for overdose and drug harm reduction measures for many years.
NZ Drug Foundation Executive Director Sarah Helm telling Checkpoint the evidence speaks for itself.
It does not encourage drug use, and in fact the opposite. People tend to then access social services, health interventions and treatment, and in some countries they've seen a rapid decline in onset of some of those more harmful drugs being taken.
Dr Dan Werb directs the Centre on Drug Policy Evaluation in Toronto. He tells a room of politicians, health and business leaders of the overwhelming success of initiatives like this overseas.
At this point, there have been millions of individual injections that have taken place in the dozens, if not hundreds, of these sites that are implemented worldwide, and there have been 0 deaths.
The Drug Foundation says it's spoken to those who had used the centre and the response has been overwhelmingly positive.
They certainly will not go to a place like the Hobson Street hub now, I think they call it.
But Fire Michelle Kidd says an inner-city overdose prevention centre in Auckland misses the mark.
It's not looking at the underlying things, and for me it's just another clip the ticket. Okay, and nobody's going to like me for saying this. But I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to see it, to see it from my perspective of not having the resources to assist these people.
She sees it as a designer detox unit for designer drugs, which she says people on Auckland Street don't and can't access.
Glue, alcohol, methylated spirits, those are the world of the drugs that are prevalent when you're homeless.
And she's dubious the homeless consuming those drugs near businesses, residential blocks, along streets, down alleys. are even going to show up to places like the City Mission.
When that synthetic cannabis was rife throughout the streets, they would come and sit here. I just need to sit here because I don't know what's happening to my brain. Okay? They're not going to go blop, 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 blop all the way up to the Auckland City Mission.
But on the streets of Auckland, some are cautiously supportive.
There'll be no requirement for those people to continue to stay there. They'll be able to come and go as they please. So, yeah, just what the process is and what will be put in place.
I think it's a great thing, and why wouldn't it be? I think all New Zealanders should get behind it.
But what about those who actually know what it's like?
I'm a drug user myself. I've been through all that. I've done a bit of crime and all that.
As we chat, he tells me a safe space for consumption is better than the opposite, but only if it comes with a permanent roof.
If you are, it needs to be one you stay in, you know what I mean? One you've got to stay at that place to do.
And it is 20 to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. If you're listening to that story on radio, do check out the video version filmed by Nick Monroe. We'll put it on our webpage. A lot of you getting in touch about whether younger teens, should be able to work. This person says, "Hi, my name's Nata." Kia ora, Nata. And I think that 13-year-olds should be able to work at retail jobs because it gives them important life skills at a young age that could be beneficial for later on in life. It also gives them a little bit of pocket money and encourages them to work hard to get the things they want. It also instills a good work ethic in our future. Brian has got in touch to say 10-year-olds pulled trolleys in coal mines because they were smaller than horses, so they shouldn't work. And Jim from Papamoa says, let's bring back chimney sweeps. Of course, the modern version will be polishing solar panels. How's it down there today in Papamoa, Jim? I bet it's a blinder. And this person says, is Australia seriously considering getting children? And yes, 13-year-olds are still children to solve a jobs crisis driven by poor pay and COVID shortages. If these same kids work to 65, that's more than 80% of their lives, says Thomas from Wellington. Do keep it coming, 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. And coming up, the want-to-be apprentice shepherds that need farms to train on. Homai o whakaaro. Do keep your thoughts coming. About teenage workers, what age do you reckon is a good age to let them go to work? Is 13 too young? What kind of jobs? And what do you make of this plan for basically a drugs room in Auckland CBD where people can take illegal drugs safely and under supervision? Text is 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email. The address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines now. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Thank you, Lisa. Firefighters have suspended all strike notices after agreeing to enter facilitated mediation. A meeting's been held with Internal Affairs Minister Jan Tinetti, Fire and Emergency and the Professional Firefighters Union. Firefighters walked off the job twice this month, pushing for better staffing, pay and resources. The Prime Minister says maintaining public confidence in KiwiSaver is more important than making sure fund managers are treated equally. The plan to tax service fees of the managed funds that are currently exempt has been abandoned. Jacinda Ardern says KiwiSaver is incredibly important to Labour because the party introduced the scheme. Midwives are taking the Ministry of Health to court in a class action over pay and what they claim is a lack of support. Christchurch midwife Violet Clapham says years of neglect and broken trust left community midwives with no choice. Russia's President Vladimir Putin is paying tribute to his former political foe, Mikhail Gorbachev, who's died at the age of 91. Mr. Putin, who clashed with Mr. Gorbachev over ending the Cold War, once describing the Soviet Union's demise as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the last century. But today, Mr. Putin is expressing his deepest condolences. And Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister is defending his decision to appoint a Minister for Coffee. The portfolio is raising eyebrows, but James Marape says it makes sense because the world loves coffee. I think I'd make a great Minister of Coffee there. Lisa?
No, get out of my way. That's my next job.
There you go, Lisa. I'll be back at 6 for more news.
Ngā mihi. A court has heard distressing testimony from a former Gloria Vale woman who says her treatment at the secretive Christian community made her suicidal. The employment court has also heard evidence girls as young as 8 were worried about being groped while serving food. Jean Edwards reports, and a warning, this story contains content that some listeners might find upsetting.
Rose Standtrue left Gloria Vale last year. Her parents and 10 siblings still live there. Through tears, she told the court via video link she felt trapped and contemplated ending her life at the commune.
And I felt like that was the only way out of Gloria Vale because I wasn't allowed to leave.
She says she lived in fear of being late for work, making a mistake, being shamed, abusive men and going to hell. She told the court her mother won't talk to her and she's been blocked from seeing her siblings.
When I tried to visit my family 3 weeks ago, I was physically forced from the room. I was pushed and shoved and restrained from seeing my siblings.
Ms Standtrue says all the single girls she knows have faced unwanted attention or abuse from Gloria Vale men. She says she was scared about a leader touching her at the dining table from the age of 8.
Nobody liked serving his table because he tried to grope them, and I was warned of this, and so I was scared.
Ms Standtrue recalled one of the men grooming and playing mind games with some girls.
I believe he's a creep and uses his authority as a servant as an excuse to torture single girls. I consider him a dangerous man.
She says all of the commune's children were required to work from a very young age. At one point, Ms Standtrue says leaders told her they believed God wanted her to make cheese. She told the court she worked long hours, was shamed when she was sick and didn't get proper breaks.
I remember being hungry most of my life.
Former member Pearl Vella told the court food was used as a weapon at Gloria Vale.
When I was only little, maybe 5, 6 or 7, when we lived down the hill, I remember being really hungry all the time. I remember not being able to go to sleep at night and saying, "Mummy, I can't go to sleep because I'm hungry."
She says women were only valued for 2 things, hard work and having babies. Mrs Vella says a friend confided she'd been abused when she was about 6 and was singled out by Gloria Vale founder Hopeful Christian.
I remember at that time Hopeful had deliberately picked on her and declared her as a bad girl in front of everybody. He called her a little harlot. Now I realise that by doing this he ensured that she became fair game for sexual abuse.
Mrs Vella and the 5 other women who've brought the case want the court to rule they were employees, a claim Gloria Vale's leaders strongly deny.
Jean Edwards with that story. There were dramatic scenes inside Christchurch District Court this morning when 2 far-right activists had to be dragged into the dock by police. Co-owners of the far-right counterspin platform, Calvin Alp and Hannah Spearer, faced charges for distributing objectionable material and failing to comply with police orders. They're accused of sharing the full live stream footage of the Christchurch mosque attacks, in which 51 people were shot dead. Outside court, a crowd of about 60 people turned out to support the pair, along with a small group supporting the Muslim community. Our reporter Neva Chittick and cameraman Nathan McKinnon were there.
Calvin Alp and Hannah Spearer refused to take part in the court process, reading statements from the lawyer's bench, speaking over and ignoring Judge Jim Large. After heated back and forth, the pair were pushed into the dock by security and police, and then taken out of the court when they refused to leave. A crowd of counterspin supporters rushed to the pair once they came out.
We love you guys!
Both gave impassioned speeches to their followers.
What crime has been committed here? What crime?
And we'll never be gagged. That's just the way it is.
Hannah Spearer told the group they were fighting for freedom of speech.
It's really important that we stand because they want you guys silenced, and they've gone after us as a fishing expedition to find anything they can because Kiwis deserve the right to know.
About a dozen members of anti-fascist Aotearoa also gathered outside the building with signs in support of New Zealand's Muslim community. Sina Brown-Davis of Ngāti Whātua o Ki Kaipara helped organise the group and says it was important to show a narrative of aroha in the face of violent counterspin rhetoric.
They've had free rein in the media really to promulgate
their hatred. So it was really important for us to say there is another way. This other way is based on aroha, this other way is based on respect, this other way is based on unity. All those nice values.
Miss Brown-Davis says she was humbled by the response to their presence today.
A Muslim woman, her brother was killed in the mosque attack, and she got a lot of heart from our messages and kōrero about having our Muslim whānau's backs and giving us solidarity. So that actually brought me to tears. And for me, if we could give her heart, even after losing her brother, that means today was a success.
Spera and Alp have been remanded on bail for 3 weeks, with their next appearance scheduled for September 21st.
And the video version of that story will be on our web page. It is 12 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Community midwives say today's legal action against the Ministry of Health is a last resort after 7 years of broken promises. The College of Midwives has filed a class action in the High Court against the Ministry, alleging a breach of contract. Crystal Gibbons reports.
More than 1,300 midwives involved in the class action say they are fed up with broken promises to pay and support them properly. Kelly Pigeon is a midwife in the Bay of Plenty.
I'm based in Tauranga, but my area that I cover is about a 100-kilometre range, and that can take me about 90 minutes to drive across. I look after a caseload of about 40 to 50 women a year, and my kind of working hours are anywhere between 40 to 80 hours most weeks. Occasionally it is more than that, and they are tough weeks.
Ms Pigeon says she's seen a lot of her colleagues leave the industry due to burnout and exhaustion. The college's chief executive, Alison Eddy, says the last agreement committed the ministry to delivering 3 main things.
Firstly was to develop a new contract model, an updated fit-for-purpose contract model for community midwives, to determine fair and reasonable pay, and to explore and develop the support structures that are needed to support the community midwifery workforce. So none of those things have been achieved.
Hutt Maternity Action Trust Chair Meg Waghorn says the sector is in crisis.
To be honest, it's kind of miraculous that we have any LMC midwives left working in the community, because they have been putting up with just such incredibly poor conditions.
Meg Waghorn says independent midwives offer a wider range of birthing options and more individualised care, but they are hamstrung by legislation which doesn't allow them to charge a fair rate.
They're self-employed, but they're not allowed to negotiate with women to pay them more. And they wouldn't want to either, but it's not as if they can say, well, we can see you, I can fit you in for an extra appointment, but that's going to have a cost on top. They're not allowed to do anything like that. So they're very limited in what they can charge.
Ms Waghorn says currently there's a shortage of practising midwives.
We have many, many midwives who have moved away from practising because they just can't sustain the kind of work for the minimal pay and the poor conditions. But if the government pulled finger and actually took some serious action on this, then they would get midwives back.
Kelly Pigeon believes things may have been different if the contract had been met.
We reap what we sow, and I think we would be 2 to 3 years ahead of where we are right now with the issues of workforce pressures, retention, education, of new midwives coming in.
The Health Minister, Andrew Little, says he understands why midwives are taking the ministry to court and that he was horrified to hear of their experiences on the front line.
And it's 9 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Rounding up South Island farmers to take on apprentice shepherds is proving a bit of a challenge for a charitable training trust. Growing Future Farmers needs spots for school leavers who get 2 years of on-farm training as part of the program. Now, the trust says it's a big commitment, but it's also a chance to give back to the industry. Its Southland Liaison Manager, Amy Priest, joins us now. Kia ora, Amy. How's your herding going?
Oh, it's great, thank you. Thanks, Lisa, for having me. No, we're in the process of rounding up applicants throughout New Zealand at the moment, and it's going well so far. Thank you.
What about matching them up to farms in the South Island? Have you got people volunteering to take the apprentices on?
We have got a few great places on board already, and we're after some more. So if there's any keen farmers out there that are keen to show the young ones how it's done and put them through their paces and give them the experience and foundations to get into the pathway would be amazing.
So what do they need to commit to?
The farmers?
Yeah.
So it's 2 years of on-farm training for each student. So they have to provide accommodation for the student, which would be fully furnished, including they'd pay for the power and unlimited Wi-Fi, and they'd provide the meat for the student. They also would provide two puppies for the students.
Now you're talking, Amy. Tell us more about the puppies.
So on their first week on farm, the farmer will provide them with a puppy, which the student is to train up, which they coincide with actual puppy training with a professional that we get in each region. And they build up their skills with their puppy to educate it and educate each other, really.
So a cattle dog, do they get to keep it at the end of the apprenticeship?
They sure do, and then it's theirs to work alongside them when they get their first job.
Hey, it sounds great for the apprentice shepherd. What do the farmers get out of it?
Well, they get to share their knowledge and their skills with these young ones, and then in turn they're providing, great assets for their industry that they may potentially end up employing one of these graduates themselves. So they're building up the skill set throughout New Zealand.
And do the trainees, do they get a formal qualification? How does it work?
They sure do. They every Friday we do some studies through Eastern Institute of Technology. So in the end, they end up with a level 3 certificates in primary industries, pre-employment skills, and a certificate in agriculture. So these are we get practical training for all of this as well as online tutorials through Eastern Institute of Technology.
So who wants these jobs? Because the thing is, if you watch the TV, being a shepherd, being a farmer, it's the hard yards, and the weather has been, absolutely shite recently. There's flooding all over the place. It ain't easy. Who's in the queue to do this?
Well, there's lots of young ones that are out there, and they can see that it's actually an awesome stepping stone to get up into management roles and even become farm owners themselves. Like it's a great. And we are the primary industry as New Zealand, bringing income into New Zealand, and it's just a great asset and industry to get into.
And these young people sort of know that's what they want to do at 17?
Well, I think a lot of them have had the experience, through maybe an Uncle Joe's farm, and they think, this could be cool, or a summer job, working on a farm, and think, maybe this is something I do want to get into. And then by doing this Growing Future Farmers course, they build up their foundation of skills to get into the actual set roles in the agriculture industry that they want to get into. Like they might want to become a full stock manager on a block in the North Island, or they want to be farm owners. That would be the end goal, I would say, for many of them.
So, Amy, before you head off, if there's a farmer listening here who thinks, I'm keen to hook up and do that, and I'd love a trainee, an apprentice, what do they need to do?
They need to jump on our website, which is growingfuturefarmers.co.nz, and there's links there and phone numbers there for everyone to ring if they're interested at all. Or please jump on and get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
Good to talk to you, Amy. Thanks for joining us. That's Amy Priest, who's from Growing Future Farmers. They marry up apprentice shepherds with farmers, 2 years on deck learning the ropes. Mikhail Gorbachev, the eighth and last leader of the Soviet Union, has died in Moscow at the age of 91. He was a titan on the world stage, a young reformer who wowed the West with his promises to reform the Soviet Union. But his checkered record included a delayed reaction to the 1986 nuclear accident at Chernobyl and an inability to control enemies within the Communist Party, who launched a failed coup against him in August 1991. Our Washington correspondent, Simon Marks, was based in Moscow in the 1990s and interviewed Gorbachev after he left office.
It was an extraordinary day. He was running a think tank, was very critical of Boris Yeltsin, who had undermined him at every turn and become the leader of an independent Russia after the collapse of the USSR. And Gorbachev said he was even thinking of relaunching his own political career, something, of course, that never happened. But I remember well, he looked me deep in the eyes, grabbed my arm, and through an interpreter assured me that Russia needed needed to stay on a democratic path.
I believe that there is no doubt that Russia can become a dynamic, modern, stable nation that will be able to provide a decent standard of living for its people and spiritual freedom, cultural freedom, only if it continues the democratic process.
Mikhail Gorbachev went to his grave still believing in communist values, but at the time, December 1995, he was refusing to support communist candidates in the country's elections, saying that the party's values had been perverted and its leaders couldn't be trusted.
No, I will not support the program. I will not vote for them because I believe their agenda is very contradictory, and then I'm not sure that what they're saying today they will actually be doing. And also knowing what is in their party platform, party program, there are many things there that I cannot support, that I cannot welcome.
He also said that he wouldn't back candidates favoured by President Boris Yeltsin. He was at the time a man very much without a political home, but was still hopeful about the peaceful coexistence with the West that he had set in train through his warm and friendly relations with leaders including Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and US President Ronald Reagan. Mrs. Thatcher, after her first meeting with Gorbachev, called him a man we can do business with, and Gorbachev himself hoped that East and West could find a way of overcoming their differences, although at the moment, with Vladimir Putin's war being waged in Ukraine, that seems like a very big challenge.
A lot of thoughts coming in from you regarding KiwiSaver and also young people working. Let's start with KiwiSaver. This listener says the media should be embarrassed about stopping good legislation to stop Australian banks benefiting. Wow, I think you give us a bit too much credit for the power here. Did we stop it? Really? Someone else says Labor seeing the writing on the wall of political suicide. And another listener says if anyone was in doubt about policy versus popularity, this U-turn shows Labor's true colours, want to be popular, not interested in doing good policy. On young workers, say 13 years old going into retail, Christine says our society is materialistic enough without getting 13-year-olds to work. They could do volunteer work in the community to increase their feeling of worth, help at home for that matter. Mark says 13-year-old workers only if they're paid a full adult minimum wage to reduce exploitation.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Marama Tipole. The Prime Minister says retaining public confidence in KiwiSaver is more important than evening out the playing field for fund managers. The government has abandoned its plan to change the way tax is applied to service fees charged by managed funds, which are currently exempt. The Revenue Minister David Parker argued as recently as this morning it would make the tax system more consistent. Jacinda Ardern says public confidence in KiwiSaver is more important.
KiwiSaver is incredibly important to us. We were the government that brought in KiwiSaver. Now, whilst what we were aiming to do was simply even up the playing field for fund managers, it was more important to us that KiwiSaver is not seen to be undermined.
Official modelling suggested the move could have slashed KiwiSaver balances by more than $100 billion by 2070. Firefighters won't be carrying out any more strikes or industrial action. The Firefighters Union says all strike notices are to be suspended after members and their employer, Fire and Emergency New Zealand, agreed to enter into facilitated mediation. It says Internal Affairs Minister Jan Tinetti brought both parties together. Firefighters walked off the job for the first time in two recent strikes over staffing and resources. One of two far-right activists who appeared in court today has told her supporters they're fighting for freedom of speech. Calvin Alp and Hannah Spera made a first appearance in the Christchurch District Court on charges of distributing objectionable material and failing to comply with police orders. They're jointly charged with sharing a publication showing the full live stream of the Christchurch mosque attacks. A group of about 60 supporters greeted the pair after their release on bail, and Hannah Spera said they're fighting for them.
We stand because they want you guys silenced, and they've gone after us as a fishing expedition to find anything they can, because Kiwis deserve the right to know what their government is doing.
A former Gloria Vale member has told a court she did not realise how objectified she was at the commune until she left. Pearl Valla is one of 6 women arguing that they should have been treated as employees and not volunteers for all the years of domestic work they did at the West Coast community. Gloria Vale's leaders deny the claims that the women were employees. Mrs. Valla says her former life now seems abnormal.
In Gloria Vale, you looked up and down your body, checked for socks, checked for sleeves down. You're not even a person, you're an object. And I said to her, it's sort of embarrassing because people look at you in the face and you kind of want to cover your face. I'm not used to that at all. I'm used to looking down and looking at the ground.
Pearl Valla told the court she felt her family came second to the Gloria Vale community due to the long hours she worked. A midwife support group says it's a miracle there's any community midwives left. The College of Midwives has filed a class action in the High Court against the Health Ministry, alleging a breach of contract. Hutt Maternity Action Trust Chair Meg Waghorn says midwives have been putting up with incredibly poor conditions. Ms Waghorn says many midwives have left because of the minimal pay and conditions. Residents in the Marlborough Sounds who are cut off by recent floods have had urgent medication flown to them. Marlborough Primary Health Chief Executive Beth Tester says with further damage to the road network, a helicopter is the best option.
People who have rung or notified their pharmacies that they needed medication, it's working with the pharmacies to actually get them picked up or delivered to a central place, and then organising them with CDEM to hop onto a helicopter and be taken down the Sounds to the remote areas that have been isolated.
In the last few days, prescriptions had also been sent by barge, water taxi and 4-wheel drive where possible. The Nelson and Tasman regions moved out of a state of emergency and into an official recovery phase this afternoon. The US Justice Department says it's likely documents were concealed and removed from a storage room at Donald Trump's Florida home to obstruct the FBI's investigation. The FBI is looking into whether Mr. Trump mishandled classified materials. The former US president is refusing his request for a special master, which is a third-party lawyer or judge to review the documents. CNN's Sarah Murray has more.
They wanted to sort of lay out not only their legal argument for why they do not think a special master is necessary in this case, but they also wanted to sort of lay out the timeline of events here and in particular rebut what the Trump team has been saying in their filings. The Trump team has been saying that the former president was very cooperative, gave the Justice Department everything they were asking for, and what the Justice Department is saying in this filing is that was not the case when they showed up there in August.
Hamilton's Chartwell shopping centre has been hit by ram raiders for a second time. Police say a vehicle was used to break into the mall at about 1:30 this morning. The shopping centre was also targeted in April when a group of young children, including a 7-year-old, broke in at night and were found with stolen toys. World leaders have been paying tribute to the former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. He's died at the age of 91 after battling a long illness. Although his reforms meant to modernise the Soviet Union, they ultimately led to the country's collapse. William Tolman, one of Mr. Gorbachev's biographers, paid tribute to the former Soviet leader.
If there had been no Gorbachev, the old Cold War would have continued or maybe even worsened. He was a good man. He was a decent man. I think his tragedy is in a sense that he was too decent for the country he was leading and trying to lead in the direction of overall decency.
UN Chief Antonio Guterres says Mr. Gorbachev changed the course of history. It's 6:06. New Zealand cricket is confident there isn't about to be a mass exodus of black caps. Veteran all-rounder Colin de Grandhomme has retired from international cricket and been granted a release from his central contract after a surprise selection in the Australian Big Bash League. Bowler Trent Boult was granted a release 3 weeks ago. New Zealand cricket's Brian Stronach says some black caps are already given dispensation to play in lucrative T20 leagues, and they're confident other players aren't about to follow suit. The defending champion and a two-time champion have both been knocked out in the opening round of the women's singles at the US Tennis Open. 2021 winner Emma Raducanu has suffered a straight sets defeat to French woman Alizé Cornet. In the next match, 2018 and 2020 champ Naomi Osaka went down in straight sets to 19th seed American Danielle Collins. Phoenix men's midfielder Clayton Lewis believes they can make another good run for the Australia Cup. Wellington play Macarthur FC in the quarterfinals of the knockout competition in Sydney tonight.
We wanted to get as fit as we could this year, so we've been working very hard, and I think it's starting to show that we're not only, dominating possession, but we're also creating chances and scoring goals. So as long as we stay in the cup, we'll be able to, keep progressing forward and, hopefully be as fit as come start of the season.
The Phoenix reached the semi-finals last year. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, 1,001 tips for cold water swimming with Scottish broadcaster and aquaphile Callum McLean. Tip number 1, break the ice off first. We're introduced to the multi-sensory universe of Dr. Joe Bazinska, host of the Christchurch Word Festival event Words, Wine, Sound. And this week's Hump Prize, Never Waste Brod's beautiful celebration of tango, El Abrazo, The Embrace. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
RNZ National, Lisa Owen and Checkpoint back in a minute. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula. Cloudy periods, the odd shower mainly about Coromandel Peninsula and north of Orewa. Waikato to Manawatu, including Taumaranui and Taihape. Mainly fine but cloud and a few showers north of Mount Taranaki tomorrow. For Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, fine apart from the odd shower about Gisborne. Horowhenua, Kapiti and Wellington, also Marlborough, Nelson and Bulla, cloudy with a few showers at times. Westland and Fiordland, rain with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms, easing to showers in Fiordland overnight. And for Canterbury, fine with cloudy periods tomorrow, a few spots of rain as well. For Otago and Southland, scattered rain developing this evening, easing to isolated showers tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. And just starting up my helicopter again, Lisa. With that truck fire, northbound traffic stopped on State Highway 1 just after the Bombay off-ramp. The left lane is open, however, the right lane will remain closed overnight. It's 9 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā e ho. No mai, hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A monsoon on steroids, that's what the UN says the people of Pakistan are facing. The Prime Minister says the floods are the worst in the country's history and every province has been affected. It's been raining solidly since June and more than 1,000 people have died while 33 million people are affected. South Pakistan is being described as one giant ocean. The BBC's Pumsa Filani is at a displacement camp in Sindh province.
Officials say about 60% of Pakistan is underwater. They've also reported that 33 million people have been affected by this year's floods. Now, the numbers on their own are alarming, but it's when you get to the ground and you realize that these are not numbers, these are people. And especially poor people have been the most affected. This community were fine a few weeks ago. They were in their homes, they could feed their children, they had clothes. And when the floods came, their homes were destroyed. A number of them lived just across the road, others where there's currently water. Under that water is where their homes used to be. They tell me that they've gone for days without food and they don't know if help is coming at all. Local aid agencies say they are doing everything that they can to try and feed everyone, but admit they are overstretched and under-resourced. They're also relying on help from international donors. People have tried saving. See, these sort of pictures that when people arrive, anyone that stops by and brings any little thing, it creates panic, it creates desperation in people because they don't know who else is going to come and what they will bring for them. It's created a sense of desperation and uncertainty for poorer communities. And these sorts of images, people worry, will continue on for at least months. They don't know when life will return to normal.
And in the north of Pakistan, the BBC's Secunda Kamani spoke to people who've lost everything.
Along one of Pakistan's busiest motorways, a makeshift camp. Poor families forced from their homes. I'm in so much pain, I can't even express it, says Rosina. We've even lost our honour. Where else can we go? Wading through the suburbs of the northern city of Nowshera, families trying to reach their homes. We haven't been able to get to our house. Just look at the road, says this woman. How can we get there? No one is helping us. Imadullah, a chef, has just returned to his home for the first time. Will you be able to buy all of these things again, rebuild this house? No, he says. I'm just asking God to help us get enough food for now. We've got nothing left. We couldn't save anything, just our children's lives. Look at all of this.
Floods happen during the monsoon here every year, but not like this.
Tributes have flown worldwide for Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union, who's died at the age of 91. He oversaw economic and political reforms which led to the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991 and the end of the Cold War. Vladimir Putin has expressed his deep sympathies, but a senior Russian MP has already blamed Mr. Gorbachev for creating the so-called unjust world order that Russia is trying to overturn by invading Ukraine. The BBC's Steve Rosenberg looks back at his historical life.
He was the kind of Russian leader the world had never seen. Mikhail Gorbachev smiled. He was relaxed. In the West, he acquired almost pop star status for helping to end the Cold War. But at home, it was a different story. Born in the days of dictator Joseph Stalin, Gorbachev became a committed communist, rising fast through the ranks of the Soviet Communist Party to the ruling Politburo. Gorbachev stood out. He was young, energetic, unlike his colleagues. As Kremlin old-timers died in quick succession, the USSR was looking more like a cemetery than a superpower. But in 1985, Gorbachev became leader and launched perestroika, reforms to reinvigorate the Soviet Union. At home, there were Western-style walkabouts. Abroad, he charmed an iron lady and a US president. Together, Gorbachev and Reagan slashed their nuclear arsenals. With a reformer in the Kremlin, Eastern Europe saw a chance to break free from Moscow. When the Berlin Wall fell, crucially, Gorbachev refused to intervene to prop up the Iron Curtain. By now, his own country was breaking apart amid ethnic conflicts and economic chaos. Gorbachev was losing control. In August 1991, communist hardliners staged a coup. It collapsed, but soon after, so did the Soviet Union. President Gorbachev resigned, and the USSR was consigned to history. Many Russians still blame Gorbachev for letting a superpower slip away. Some of what he changed didn't last. The arms race and geopolitical tension are back. Gorbachev will be remembered for at least having tried to end the rivalry between East and West. But I will remember him for this. After one interview, he invited me to play his piano while he sang the favourite songs of his late wife. It was a surreal but special moment that showed the warm, human side of the Russian leader who'd struck a chord with millions around the world.
It's 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. There's a fresh warning that Australia's east coast is facing an escalating risk of power blackouts as a string of coal-fired plants shut down. The body that runs the country's biggest electricity market says it's still possible to keep the lights on, provided much-needed renewable energy and transmission projects are built on time. The ABC's Daniel Mercer reports.
As the East Coast energy crisis took hold at the beginning of winter, Lisa Zembrodt had an interesting perspective. The company she works for, French conglomerate Schneider Electric, is a big advisor to Australian energy users, but it's also a major manufacturer of electrical equipment and, as such, a big consumer of energy.
We have the advantage that we have been listening to the advice of our consulting teams, and we've taken actions from an energy efficiency standpoint. But at the end of the day, we are still an energy user and are still operating in this economy as well, right? It's really that overall economic health that's of a concern.
Lisa Zembrodt, Schneider's Director of Energy Markets, says the turmoil has been difficult for everybody.
It's a tough situation over the last 6 months that we've been facing since the time that Russia invaded Ukraine. It's really thrown global energy markets for a doozy, really.
On top of that, a quarter of coal-fired power plants were affected by outages. Now a new report by the Australian Energy Market Operator is warning supply pressures could get even worse within a few years. With 5 East Coast coal-fired power plants due to exit the market over the coming decade, taking with them 14% of generation capacity, supply could fall short of demand, hitting New South Wales by 2025, followed by Victoria in 2028, Queensland the year after, and South Australia by 2031. Matt Rennie is a partner with energy consultancy Rennie.
The great energy transition that we've all been speaking about for the last 10 years is well and truly up and running. We're now starting to understand what happens at the end of coal and asking ourselves the question about whether electrification is doable.
For AEMO, building 3.4 gigawatts of renewable energy and transmission projects, enough to power 2.25 million homes, will be crucial to keeping the lights on. Matt Rennie agrees, but he says finding the required workers won't be easy.
We've never had a labour market which is more tight. Everybody is going through this electrification at the same time, and we're anticipating large shortages in the amount of labour that'll be available in order to make this happen.
Tennant Reid is the Climate and Energy Director at the Australian Industry Group, which represents major manufacturers. He notes AEMO's forecasts are usually conservative and don't take account of some projects that are likely to come online.
Ideally, we would be accelerating a lot of those timeframes because we are going to be paying through the nose for electricity and gas over the next few years because of the price of coal and natural gas in international markets. But we had our work cut out for us just to deliver the existing timeframes, let alone to do the acceleration that would benefit us.
Lisa Zembrodt from Schneider hopes a fix can be found.
It's certainly very difficult for an economy to flourish when energy costs are exorbitant.
And that report from the ABC. Former US First Lady Melania Trump was, quote, annoyed by the FBI search of her Florida home because it reached her private rooms. Friends have reported that she wasn't worried about what they would find, as she would never have let Donald Trump keep his belongings in her room. CNN's Kate Bennett has more.
As Donald Trump rages against the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago earlier this month, his wife, Melania Trump, is doing what she often does, staying quiet. Those who spoke to CNN say privately Melania Trump was, quote, annoyed by federal agents searching her home, her things displaced, her closets of designer clothes upended. Her husband posting, just learned that agents went through the First Lady's closets and rummaged through her clothing and personal items. Surprisingly, left the area in a relative mess. The ever-private former First Lady lives predominantly full-time at Mar-a-Lago. She has retreated out of the public eye since leaving Washington. One of the most recent sightings of her was last month departing the funeral service for Ivana Trump in Manhattan. But little else. In July, she released a public statement confirming CNN reporting she wasn't paying attention to the raid on the Capitol on January 6th, instead overseeing a photo shoot of a rug inside the White House. On January 6, 2021, I was fulfilling one of my duties as First Lady of the United States of America. And accordingly, I was unaware what was simultaneously transpiring at the U.S. Capitol building. Her only media interview post-White House this May, before the FBI search.
Time flies fast, and everybody's doing very well.
Those who know her tell CNN there would be nothing of Donald Trump's in Melania Trump's living quarters. Not only do the couple have separate bedrooms, one person says Melania would, quote, never allow the former president to store his items in her space. Her interests of late? Melania Trump has apparently become an entrepreneur in the NFT cryptocurrency retail business, promoting a little-known website selling digital collectibles with America-related themes and moments from the Trump administration featuring her picture. It's the hawking of memorabilia by a former First Lady for profit. There is no charitable component to the website she has promoted to her millions of Twitter followers. That has raised eyebrows.
I have been working on my NFT projects since I left the White House. My NFTs, they are available on melaniatrump.com and usmemorabilia.com.
One former Trump advisor going so far as to say, quote, "It's weird." It is unusual for a First Lady to spend her post-White House popularity and platform on an endeavor in a narrow niche and not a global initiative. CNN has reached out several times for clarity on whether funds have gone to any specific children's charities and has never received a response.
Well, people I see always criticize me whatever I do, and I'm used to that. I move forward.
And that was CNN's Kate Bennett reporting. The Duchess of Sussex, Prince Harry's wife, says that just by existing, she upset the hierarchy of the British royal family. Meghan has been speaking to the US magazine The Cut. Here's the BBC's Nicholas Witchell.
It's the latest expression of the truth according to Meghan, a 6,000-word article in which she reflects on her marriage to Prince Harry and her brief time as a working member of the British royal family. Just by existing, we were upsetting the dynamic of the hierarchy, she's quoted as saying. Quite what she meant is unclear. There was an ambiguous reference to family relationships. She told the interviewer, "Harry said to me, I lost my dad in this process." Meghan was apparently referring to her broken relationship with her own father rather than to Harry's relationship with Prince Charles. She was asked whether she had room for forgiveness between her, the royal family, and her own family. "It takes a lot of effort to forgive," Meghan said. "I've really made an active effort, especially knowing that I can say anything." The Duchess's many supporters will doubtless applaud her candour. By contrast, the royal family itself may be hoping for a period of dignified silence.
Nicholas Witchell reporting there. All eyes are on tennis star Serena Williams as she advances at the US Open in what may be the final tournament of her legendary career. She'll face the world's number 2 player tomorrow after a convincing win in the first round. CNN's Bryn Gingras has more on the woman who's dominated the game for decades.
A grand entrance fit for
the greatest of all time, Serena Williams.
Serena Williams took the court at Arthur Ashe Stadium to a record-setting crowd, celebrities paying homage.
The years went by in a blink.
Fans both on the ground, in the air, everyone watching, wondering if this would be her last match of a storied career.
When I walked out, the reception was really overwhelming. It was loud. I could feel it in my chest.
Williams competed in the first round of the US Open Monday, the very tournament where she clinched her first Grand Slam title in 1999, wearing those signature beads in her hair. This time, her daughter Olympia sporting the trademark look.
There was great significance in those cute little beads that Olympia was wearing as well, because Serena debuted those at a time where people said, hey, what's that?
23 Grand Slam singles wins later, Williams' contribution to the sport is unrivaled. For decades, she's remained unapologetically authentic, an icon. With a serve as fierce as her fashion, Williams transformed tennis, not only how it's played.
Thank you for your leadership and commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
But who can play it?
So growing up, I never thought that I was different because, the number one player in the world was somebody who looked like me.
But it's a personal transformation, or evolution, as she calls it, that Williams says she is poised to tackle next.
I'm not necessarily retiring. I'm just evolving from tennis.
In early August, the 40-year-old announced her farewell to the sport in a personally penned Vogue magazine article.
It's just been an incredible ride, and I'm so happy that you guys are on it with me.
Williams says her energy will turn to her family, possibly expanding that family, and continuing to focus on investing in companies, particularly ones led by women.
It's like Serena 2.0.
But before her triumphant tennis ending is told, fans are getting a tease from Williams. She won her match Monday night and hinted that she may not be quite ready to call game, set, match.
Will this definitively be your final tournament? And
yeah, I've been pretty vague about it, right? Yeah. I'm going to stay vague because you never know.
Australian golf star Cameron Smith has made the controversial decision to sign with the Live Golf, the breakaway tour backed by the Saudi government. The 29-year-old British Open winner has become the first member of golf's top 10 to join the tour. The move has sparked fury among golfing fans and criticism from human rights groups who say Saudi's so-called sports washing shouldn't distract from its human rights abuses. The ABC's Stephanie Smale reports.
The rumours about Cameron Smith and Live Golf were already swirling as he wowed the world at the British Open in July. When he won it, reporters wanted to know if he was going to defect.
What's your position? Are you interested? Is there any truth to suggestions that you might be signing?
I just won the British Open and you're asking about that. I think that's not that good.
I appreciate that, but the question is still there. Are you interested at all? Is there any truth in that?
I don't know, mate. My team around me worries about all that stuff. I'm here to win golf tournaments.
He'll be doing that on a different tour now, leaving the PGA for the Saudi-backed tour, which is led by fellow Australian Greg Norman. It's an initiative of the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, a sovereign wealth fund that claims to be independent of the country's government, but is chaired by its Crown Prince. The Australian Golf Digest magazine's associate editor, Steve Kiepert, says Cameron Smith would have secured a huge paycheck just to sign on.
Somewhere between 100 and 200 million seems to be the mark, and that's obviously US dollars. You won't be seeing Cam Smith queuing at Centrelink anytime soon.
There will also be millions of dollars of prize money up for grabs at each tournament. Cameron Smith has reportedly told the American publication of Golf Digest that while money was a factor, he was mostly attracted by the schedule, which will allow him to spend more time in Australia. Steve Kiepert says with signs the Live Tour is going from strength to strength, professional golf is going to get messy.
Because you're going to have the two circuits operating side by side, but in spite of each other, really. And are more players going to jump ship? What's the general sentiment going to be? And which tournaments will the players who've gone to Live still be allowed to play, particularly when it comes to the majors next year?
Former professional golfer Grant Dodd says Saudi Arabia's human rights record has been an issue for Live Golf as it tries to build its brand. But he says accusations of so-called sports washing, investing in sport to improve reputation, have been carefully managed.
Gradually, those questions are going away. The tour does appear to have gained a real foothold in the world of professional golf. There's talk of it coming to Australia next year or the year after. It's going to evolve in certain ways. It's trying to present Live as being an alternative to professional golf. So the money, it does appear to have rode roughshod over any moral questions at the moment.
And that's it from us tonight, but ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up speaks to Finance Minister Grant Robertson about the government's extraordinary U-turn on its plan to tax fees on KiwiSaver funds. Tune in 5 a.m.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. I'm Louise Pagonis. The Prime Minister says the government only wanted to treat fund managers equally with its now abandoned plan to tax fees. Firefighters have suspended their strike notices and will enter into facilitated mediation. An 11,000 signature petition calling for a moratorium on mining on conservation land was taken to Parliament today, and the US Justice Department says it's likely Donald Trump hid and removed documents from storage to obstruct the FBI's investigation. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
We heard from Lynette Dawson's brother, and he said that it was a relief that Lynette Dawson's name has really been cleared because of the defence theory that was put forth that she might have, walked out and abandoned her family.
The research shows that taking supplements